What's up everybody, it's your boy Nate. Now, most of you guys subscribed because you have been hooked onto 3D animation and are as inspired as I was when I first saw this. This is Tears of Steel, and when I first saw this in 2008, my jaw dropped, not only because the VFX animation and just all around everything was just so freaking awesome, but because it was made using an entirely free 3D software called Blender. And you know what we're gonna be doing today? We're gonna be diving right into Blender, starting from the absolute basics. So don't worry if you guys have never touched the software before. Shoot, don't worry if you haven't even downloaded it, because it's a pretty quick and easy download, and it's also free. Hey, who doesn't like free shit? Oh shoot, wait, and if you guys have not subscribed, make sure you guys go ahead, smash that subscribe button, turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on any of the super dope stuff that we got planned. All right, you already know what time it is. Let's go. So I first started learning 3D animation many years ago in a faraway time called 2008, back when phones were still phones, softwares you only paid for once, and pretty much 3D animation was impossible for anyone who wasn't related to Bill Gates. But you know what? Inspired by a childish will that anything was possible, all thanks to Naruto, I ended up diving into the interwebs, finding out about a software called Blender, which hey, if you guys have stumbled on this video, you probably found out about this software as well. And you know what? It helps you make some really cool shit. Now, I could go on and get super technical about like IK rigging and modeling and 3-point lighting, but I figured it'd be much more helpful and fun to actually just dive into a project about blowing up. And you know what? You're gonna learn how to do this today. Roll clip.
I've been missing out the walk with the minute. I've been building up the blocks like a man. Elliot got water dripping out the city. Oh my god. Oh my god. Whatever on top, sip and walk, make my heart stop. Yeah, my love, my thigh, yo, I let her go, put her on roll, put that home payroll, put that on roll, yeah, she like to go, yeah, she love to.
Okay, so first thing to actually do in order to make this, let's go ahead and open up Blender. Now, when you first open up Blender, you're gonna get this pop-up window. Bam, we can just go ahead and click general on it. Instantly, you're gonna see we have a simple scene set up for us with a camera, a light, and a 3D cube. You can destroy pretty much anything in Blender using this method, but today I'm gonna show you how to do it on something really simple and really practical like a wall. So let's hop right into it. Modeling this wall. This should be easy enough. I'd say right now a wall would just be a skinnier version of this cube here. That means that we probably only have to scale down the width and it's gonna look a little bit more wall-y. So to do that, I'm gonna press S on my keyboard and that's gonna pull up the scale properties of this cube. And now as I move my mouse up and down or left and right or whatever, it's gonna be scaling the cube. But since we only wanted to scale down the width, I'm gonna press X on my keyboard and you're gonna see it's only gonna scale it on the X axis. If I press Y on my keyboard, it's only gonna do it on the Y axis. So let's go ahead and get this nice and looking like a wall here. Since I'm noticing that it's just scaling all over the place, you can press Shift Tab on your keyboard and that's gonna make it snap to nice whole even numbers. That's gonna come in nice and handy once we get into doing the physics of this. Okay, cool. So this is nice. This is looking more like a wall. So to look around this wall, you can middle click on your mouse and drag around and you're gonna see that the camera kind of orbits the center here. I'm a little bit too far away, so I also want to zoom in and use that same middle wheel, but by scrolling up, bam, the cube looks a lot bigger. Okay, cool. So this is looking pretty nice, but I'm noticing that this wall right here is floating a little bit. So I want to go ahead and make it look like it's more on the ground plane here. So to do that is pretty easy. I'm gonna press the number pad 1 and that's gonna put me into my side view. This red line here is this X axis. So let's go ahead and move this cube up. To move the cube, you can press G on the keyboard. That's gonna pull up the transform properties. And as I move up my mouse, you're gonna see it's starting to move around. So let's just press Z on the keyboard and bam, you're gonna see it's only moving up and down. And using that same technique as earlier, I'm gonna press Shift Tab so that it locks into nice even numbers. That is looking nice right there. Cool, so this is looking pretty good. So now that we have the wall here, let's go ahead and destroy it. There's a whole bunch of ways to destroy it. I actually looked up a few different ways before making this tutorial, and for some reason I was surprised that not enough people were telling you the easiest way to do it, which is by using a plugin called Cell Fracture. To get this plugin is actually really easy as well. All you have to do is go all the way up to Preferences, which you can find under the Edit tab here, and once you click on that, go to the tab that says Add-ons. Right here on the left, you're gonna see a tab that says Add-ons. All the way up in the tiny right-hand corner, you're gonna see this magnifying glass. There's just a search bar, so you're gonna wanna look for a plugin called Cell Fracture. So let's just type in Cell, and instantly you're gonna see it pops up. On your computer, it's gonna probably be an empty checker box. So just go ahead and check the middle of there. And just like that, you got a plugin. Holy shit, Blender is amazing. I don't know why other softwares don't make adding add-ons just like this freaking easy. So once you have that, all you gotta do is close out of this and you instantly have Cell Fracture. Okay, cool. So I could just run Cell Fracture on this now and it's just gonna go ahead and break up the wall randomly, but I could also tell it where to blow it up, more specifically kind of Bob Ross it. So let's go ahead and I'll show you exactly what I mean. All the way up in the top left corner, you're gonna see this little drawing pencil icon, and that's pretty much the annotate tool. Using the annotate tool, I can just draw right onto this. Bam, we get these 3D lines getting drawn. So I'm just gonna undo that here really quickly, because even though I want this to be drawn on the on this wall here, I want it only to stick to the surface. If I click all the way in the top left here, you're gonna see where it says 3D cursor. You can go ahead and click on this, select surface. What that's gonna do is make sure that when we start drawing with this annotate tool, it's not drawing all over the place, but instead just to the surface of this wall here that we modeled. To make these drawings a little bit easier, I want to frame this wall a little bit more center in my view. So to frame this in view, we can go ahead and hold Shift on our keyboard while holding down the middle mouse wheel. That's gonna let us pan around this cube. Let's get this nice and center. Okay, so now we got the shot looking nice. Let's draw on this cube and show Blender where we want this to be broken up. You guys can just go ahead and have fun with it. There's no mistakes here. You know, just get in there. You know, take out all your frustrations on this cube. It's right here in the center. That's where I'm gonna make it. And yep, and then afterwards, you know, I'm just gonna leave these big open areas. I'm just letting all my peace and happiness radiate outwards, much like this wall will in a second. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now I'm gonna go all the way up here to this button that says Object, all the way down to Quick Effects, and you're gonna see at the very bottom here it says Cell Fracture, and this new pop-up window pops up and it's gonna show all these freaking options, which looks confusing, but trust me, we don't need to worry about all of these. We're in fact just gonna change a few of them. Now, one option that you're gonna see is pretty obvious, is instead of using own particles and child particles, let's go ahead and click Annotation Pencil. And all that's gonna do is tell Cell Fracture to use that drawing, that beautiful masterpiece that we just made earlier, to determine where these fragments or pieces are going to be. Now on source limit, I'm going to change this from 100 to 200, but you can go ahead and make this whatever number you want. This is pretty much just going to say how many pieces you want Cell Fracture to make out of this object. I think 200 is good because, you know, sometimes keeping it 100 just ain't enough nowadays. Okay, so on recursive shatter, I'm going to change it from 0 to 1. What that's going to do is tell it to go ahead and break itself up on itself. Now you can leave this at small, whatever you really want it to be. It can be random as well. Go ahead, you can have fun with these settings here. Oh, and the most important setting of all is that you want to make sure that in scene collection, you go ahead and give this a name. So let's go ahead and name this Pieces, like Reese's Pieces. Babe, we should get Reese's to sponsor us. That'd be cool. And pretty much what this is gonna do once we give it a name to this collection is it's gonna take all of those pieces that we made and put them into a group. That way it's not just gonna be all over the place, which is gonna give you a nightmare. That is it, and now we can just go ahead and click OK and let Cell Fracture do its thing. Yeah, that actually looks pretty dope. Holy shit. So this is looking pretty cool, but you're gonna notice that it's also kind of a mess. So let's go ahead and clean this up. The first thing I want to go ahead and do, minimize this collection here on the right with this arrow that says pieces, and then I can go ahead and click outside of this just so that we deselect all of those pieces as well. So right now we're done using the annotation tool and making all of these drawings. So let's go ahead and click on the normal select tool, which is right up here in the top left. And to get rid of those annotations, I'm going to press N on my keyboard and click on view, and then down here in the bottom you're going to see annotations where it says note. I can either just turn this off and it disappears, or I can go ahead and delete it. whichever you guys want. Doesn't really matter at this point because we don't need those anymore. Now it's looking a lot better, but this wall still is super fuzzy, and that's because we have the pieces on top of the original wall that we had. It's like kind of getting rendered on top of each other, so it's looking all kinds of funky. You can look here on the right hand corner, that original cube that we started off with is going to be there. You can just click on this little eyeball icon and that makes it disappear. Now, one thing to note though, once we click render, it is still going to show up, but I'm going to teach you how to get rid of that using the visibility properties in a second. So this little icon that looks like a square, an orange square with like these other orange square outside of it. And if you go all the way down to visibility, you can see where it says viewports, renders. You just click those boxes, bam, they're not gonna show up anymore. Okay, cool. So we have a pretty nice broken wall, but there are absolutely no physics applied to it yet. So if I press space on my keyboard, nothing happens as expected. So that brings me to my next super fun part of this project, which is adding physics to objects. So to add physics, we can just go ahead and click on one piece here. And on the left hand side here, you're gonna see this little circle with like another circle orbiting an icon. If you click on rigid body, press space on your keyboard, bam, that piece falls. And if we hit space again on the keyboard, that animation is gonna stop. Let's go ahead down to this timeline here and click and drag just to bring this animation all the way back to the beginning. That's looking pretty good, but we want the rest of the wall to fall. So with that same piece selected, I'm gonna right click on the collection that we made earlier, which you can find all the way in the top right hand corner here. And then I'm gonna click on this icon called select objects. Bam, you're gonna see everything get highlighted except for that same piece that we had selected in the beginning. It's going to be a brighter orange than everything else that's in orange. So next, let's go all the way up to object. Underneath the tab rigid body, we're gonna click copy from active. And what that's gonna do is copy those same physics properties that we applied to that one piece to the rest of those pieces that we made. If you click play on your keyboard, bam, the whole wall falls. But since we don't want this wall to just be falling into an abyss, we want it to hit a floor. Let's go ahead and make one. So to create an object, press Shift A on your keyboard and bam, you're gonna get this pop-up menu with a whole bunch of options. So we can go ahead and create a ground plane by clicking on mesh and then going to plane. It's the first option here. So now we have a floor, but it's definitely looking way too small. So let's use that same method that we used earlier to scale it up. I'm gonna press S on my keyboard, but this time, rather than just dragging my mouse outwards, I can also press the numbers 10 or 10 and it's pretty much just gonna scale it up by a factor of 10. That's looking pretty good. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and press play and the wall falls right through the floor, which looks cool, but it's not exactly what we wanted to do. We want the wall to actually collide with the floor and, you know, make it look like it's crumbling. So to do that, it's actually really easy. We can go ahead and click on the plane and then go back to that circle with an orbit icon, click on physics properties and select rigid body. Now if we press play, the whole floor is gonna fall with the wall too. So let's go ahead and fix this by changing it. Instead of leaving the type, go ahead and click on active and you're gonna see underneath it, there's gonna be an option called passive, which pretty much just means that the floor is not gonna be a moving object, but it's still gonna have some physics properties with it. And now if we hit play on our keyboard, yo, holy shit, this is looking freaking dope. Now you guys can leave it at this, but I am noticing that it is kind of breaking up a little bit quirky. It looks a little bit weird here. And I think it's because of two main issues with it. One, it's sliding around all over the place. And then two, those physics are looking a little bit off to where like some of the bigger pieces are falling like really quickly and the smaller pieces are falling at like just the same rate. And I think I know why. So once we set those physics for that initial piece and copied it over to all the other pieces, it actually copied over the same mass and the same friction settings, which we probably don't want. We want smaller objects to have smaller masses and bigger objects to have bigger masses. And that's just gonna make sure that things look and move the way that they would in a kind of like a real world setting. Of course, you can make it like however you want it, but in this instance, let's go ahead and try to make it look a little bit more realistic. So to do that, it's actually pretty easy. Let's go ahead and make sure that we move out our ground plane because it looks like it got created and put into that collection of pieces just by default. So to do that, just go ahead and click on it outside of that collection. That way, once we go into adding these physics properties, the ground plane doesn't get adjusted as well. Okay, cool. So that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and increase the friction of these pieces. So to do that, it's pretty easy. Let's just do the same thing as earlier. Click on any of the pieces here I'm gonna go ahead and select on any piece here and go into the physics properties, but this time under surface response, instead of leaving it at 0.5, I wanna crank this up to something like 0.8. Let's go ahead and right click on the collection, select objects, go up to object, rigid body, and copy from active. Instantly, all these now pieces have a little bit more friction and they're breaking up and not sliding all over the place a little bit better. But we still have a huge problem, which is the mass. Each of these objects you could individually go through and calculate, and honestly you'd have to be some sort of math whiz to do that. Or you can let Blender do all the hard work for you with a simple button, which you can find right here by going all the way up to object, rigid body, and click calculate mass. And then you're gonna have all these different options pop up, which you can click on any of them. I played around with concrete before, it looks pretty cool. You know, brick is also pretty cool. They have common, soft. I'm gonna go ahead and click on brick press. And yo, once we hit play on the keyboard, instantly the wall breaks way better. Smaller objects move faster, bigger, what the f is bigger? Holy Smaller objects move faster, bigger objects move slower, and we have way less jittery slips here and there. So if you also want to get into like seeing more of the details, you can click on any of these objects here and look at the mass just change, you know, like the smaller objects literally have smaller masses, which is freaking cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of that side panel. I'm just gonna go ahead and press N on my keyboard to get rid of that. If I wanna preview this wall breaking in a little bit more beauty and glory, we can click on the different viewport shading options, which is all the way up in the top right hand corner here. I'm gonna click on the far right one, and this is gonna make it render using Blender's built-in Eevee renderer. It's one of my favorite ones, it runs super fast. Okay, so one thing that you guys are gonna notice from the examples I showed you is that we have this really cool time ramp effect going on where it's like something smashes into this wall and then it just like explodes out super slow motion, kind of like a movie. Looks super dope. So let's go back to the easier render viewport mode just so we can add in this really nice time ramp effect. Okay, so to add that time ramp effect, we can go ahead and click on the scene properties, which is this icon right here, and underneath the rigid body tab, if you click on this little arrow here, it's gonna expand out some more settings. One of those settings that we care about is speed. And right now it's just set to 1, which is pretty much real-time speed. So let's go ahead a little bit forward in the timeline, and this little dot here right next to speed, I'm gonna go ahead and click on it, and you're gonna see it changes to a diamond. And then in the timeline here, we have a new diamond made, which is pretty much just a new keyframe. Now, if you guys haven't heard of keyframes before, all they are little points of data that say be here at this time, at this place specifically. So for this keyframe, it says for the speed to be set to 1 at frame 14. So now let's go forward a little bit in the timeline and change this 1 to something like 0.2 and press this diamond icon again to lock in that keyframe. So now if we press the space bar and press play on our timeline, we're gonna see that the animation slows down to about 20%, which is pretty cool, but I kind of want it to slow down even more. So let's just go ahead and change this 0.2 to something like 0.02, which is gonna be just 2% speed. And again, I'm gonna press that diamond icon to lock in that new keyframe. Okay, cool, so that's looking a little bit better, but I'm noticing that it happens a little bit too late for me. So I wanna shift these keyframes, and to do that, it's pretty easy. Just go ahead and select them and then click and drag any direction to move them. I wanna move these back a little bit, and that's gonna be shifting them earlier in the timeline. Okay, cool, so once I press play, I'm noticing that there's some weird physics going on, probably because of the time ramps getting like coded into this, just like messing with it. So let's just go ahead and select one keyframe and just kind of vary the distance between these two here. It might take a little bit of finagling here and there because it is running like a simulation, so up to you guys with how you want it to look. But once you get it looking into a nice place for yourselves, we can go ahead and get into rendering this animation out. Now, normally rendering is like a whole nother topic in itself. You can get into the nitty-gritty of rendering, but for this example, let's just go ahead and make something super simple and easy to set up, and it's gonna work for us about like 90% of the time. Okay, so the first step is to turn on the viewport shading here, which is gonna show us what our rendered image is like more closely gonna look like. Looking a little bit too dark, so let's go ahead and add in some lights. We can use that same method earlier to add in the ground plane, but instead we're gonna add in a light. So I'm gonna press Shift A on my keyboard. It's gonna pull up this pop-up menu. Underneath light, I'm gonna go ahead and click on point, and that's gonna create a new point light right in the center of our project here. And just like that, boom, you got light. So let's go ahead and move around this light. I'm gonna press G on my keyboard and then just move my mouse around. I'm gonna press X and Y to like lock it into those specific axes there. So I'm moving a little bit easier here. And this is looking pretty good. I kind of just want it like a little bit forwards in front of it, just illuminating the scene here. And once I got that one looking pretty good, I can click on this light bulb icon down here. And here we have a few options that are gonna let us change the light. I like blue and red, so I'm gonna go ahead and click on color here, drag this over to the blue. That looks pretty cool. Let's increase the radius of this and the power of this, just to make this light a little bit brighter. Ooh, that's looking nice. So next, I'm gonna duplicate this light by pressing Shift D on my keyboard while I have it selected. And now when I move over my mouse, you can see the light is just getting moved over. So let's move this duplicated light over here, and we're gonna set up a super simple 3-point light setup. I'm also gonna change this color to blue. Pretty much I'm just moving around my camera, trying to get a good angle on it so I can see where I have this light here. Let's just duplicate it again. Cool. I just want to add a little bit more light back here so we can move this light over this way. Okay, so that's looking nice. I want to frame this action in view for my camera. So to do that, let's go into our side view first by pressing the number pad 1 on the keyboard. If you guys don't have a number pad because you're on a laptop, you can also just go ahead and use these icons up here for X, Y, and Z. Or the Y or the X one is going to give you that same look here. Okay, so that's looking cool. Now let's select that camera that we had in the scene that was generated for us earlier. And with that camera selected, I'm going to use the hotkey Control-Alt-0, and what that's going to do is frame in our camera to match the same viewport that we had earlier. Okay, so that's looking pretty nice. Now let's go into the render options, which is this tab over here, and I'm going to turn on ambient occlusion. Instantly we get nice and fast shadows. I'm also going to turn on screen space reflections, mainly because I used a material that had like reflections, but up to you guys. I'm also going to turn on motion blur and high quality normals, which is underneath the performance tab here. And then I'm also going to go down to shadows and turn on high bit depth, which is going to make those shadows look a little bit better and have more blacks and depth in it. Okay, cool. So this is looking pretty nice, but we can also make this look a little bit nicer with some materials. So to add materials to this, you can click any piece on this, and underneath your materials tab, which is down in the bottom here, you can go ahead and click open up the preview. Now I recommend, if this is your first time messing with materials, just to go ahead and play around with the settings so you can see what each of them does, but definitely up to you guys with what you want to do. I think right now this red actually looks kind of cool. And let's also add in a material for the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that plane we created, open up the materials tab, click new, bam, instantly we got a material for the ground. For this one, I think I'm actually going to want to make it shiny. I'm going to leave the wall looking a little bit more flat, but I want these reflections to show up. Okay, cool. So the floor is looking nice, the wall is looking nice, but I'm noticing that the lights are showing up in this reflection, and I don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this light here, and I want this light to act more like a sun and not like a point spotlight. Now for these other ones, I kind of want to style it a little bit more. I want the shadows to follow the direction of this wall falling, so I'm going to move up this light just a little bit so I'm getting those shadows to match that angle there. Okay, so this is looking pretty cool, but the floor is definitely looking way too shiny. So let's make it a little bit darker by changing the base color from white to black. And hey, while we're doing that, why don't you guys also subscribe to Black Mixture? That was not the smoothest plug ever. If you guys made it this far in the video, you most likely are gonna enjoy our other videos. So go ahead, do yourself a favor, smash that subscribe button, turn on post notifications, and also do us a huge favor by smashing that like button and letting us know down in the comments if you like this video or not. Anyways, let's get back into the software. Okay, cool. So the floor is looking nice, the wall is looking nice, but the background is actually still too bright. It looks kind of grayish, so we can go ahead and change the background of the whole scene by going up to this setting right here, which is the world properties. You're gonna see it says surface background color, it's blank, but underneath strength it's set to 1. So if you go ahead and lower this down to 0, instantly the background becomes black. This is looking pretty cool. So now onto exporting this out, I'm gonna go ahead and click on the output properties, and it's gonna be this little icon that looks like a printer and an image coming out of a printer. By the way, it might be my favorite icon in the entire suite of like Blender icons. There's a lot of cool icons, but this one I feel like it's just freaking cool. I don't know why more 3D softwares don't make their rendering like a printer icon, because that's kind of what rendering feels like, you know, printing. Okay, so what size do we want this image to be in? You can leave it at the defaults 1920 by 1080, or you can change them. I'm just gonna leave this at default because hey, let's just get comfortable getting this image and seeing it fully rendered out. So at frame rate, you can either leave this at 24 frames per second, or you can also bump it up to 60 frames per second, which is what I did for the earlier examples. But I would warn that once you do that, sometimes the physics are going to render out a little bit differently than what you were looking at earlier. Okay, so now, super important, underneath the output tab, let's create a new place for these images, because that's what Blender is going to render out. It's just like a sequence of images. So I'm going to go ahead and select on this folder. Now we are all set to render. So go all the way up to the top left corner and you're going to see this tab that says render. Click on it. Second option there, render animation. Bam! Blender is doing its thing and it is rendering out that animation. Now, depending on how fast or how slow of a potato your computer is, this could take, you know, either a few minutes or a few hours or a few days. But thankfully, since you guys are watching the tutorial, it's only going to take you about the time it takes for you to go ahead and smash that like button. That's the last plug I'm doing. Okay, little disclaimer here. Here is the part of the tutorial where Blender crashed. Normally that would freaking be a super depressing moment and I might have even just given up, taking like a 5-day break. You know, having to start from scratch kind of sucks. But thankfully, Blender has actually a built-in autosave feature, so if you just go ahead and have that same experience happen to you, you know what? You don't have to just quit your dreams of becoming a motion designer. All you gotta do is click File, Recover, and you're gonna see Last Session or Autosave. For me, Last Session worked. For you, maybe Autosave is gonna work, and you're gonna see all the different autosaves and all the different sessions. It's freaking dope. Thank goodness whoever made Blender. Tom Rosendahl, get your boy up. Sponsor us, because yeah, the software is dope. Anyways, so cool. I'm gonna go ahead and open up that project using that autosave recover last session feature, and now I'm just gonna re-render out this video to the right folder with the right settings. Bam! This looks pretty cool. I think it's all done. I can see at the top here it's done with rendering, so let's go ahead and bring it into Adobe After Effects to take a look at this. So the first thing I'm gonna do is make a new composition. Once the render is done, it's gonna be inside of a whole folder with a bunch of different images. That same folder that we set in the output earlier. All I have to do is drag in this folder into After Effects and it's gonna read it as an image sequence. Boom, just like that. It treats it just like a video file. We can take a look at this and it looks pretty nice. You guys can take this project wherever you want from here. You can go ahead and style it like I did. Now, if you guys don't have Adobe After Effects, you can pretty much use just any sort of video editing software. About any of them should be able to read image sequences. Okay, cool. And now we have a super dope animation. I want you guys to go ahead and pat yourselves on the back because you sat through the ins and outs of Blender. Now you guys have the chops to make just about any super cool destruction animation. There is one thing though that you can do to take this to a whole nother level, which is add in a ball to destroy the things like you guys are gonna see here. And to do that, it's super easy. You can pretty much just go ahead and use Shift A to create a new sphere, doing the same way that we did with the plane by making it. Instead, we're gonna go ahead and click on sphere to create a new one. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and add in some rigid body properties to it by clicking on this tab here. There's a whole bunch of different techniques for making a really quick like ball exploding effect, but my favorite one to do is just by animating with the transform properties from 0 to something like big enough to take up enough space. All the while, it's like in the center of the ball, and what that's gonna do is just mimic like an explosion going outwards. Yeah, a lot of flexibility. I hope you guys have fun blowing shit up. If you guys like the tutorial and want to see more, make sure you guys leave us a comment down below. We're gonna love reading it. Even though we're at 175k subs, we still read the comments and we still enjoy finding out all the cool shit about you guys, what you guys are working on after watching the tutorial. So, oh, DMS on Instagram as well. You know what else? If you guys want to get a little bit closer to us, go ahead and join the Patreon, because I'm going to be uploading this exact project file that I use in the tutorial right there to Patreon, as well as all the other project files for the other tutorials. So anyways, thanks a lot, you guys. It's a huge honor to get to show you some really cool techniques and also get to see all the dope stuff that you guys are going to be coming up with. As always, I hope to catch you all on the next one. Peace. Yo, we are actually, I don't even know what, any other plugs I gotta say?
We're at 175k. Christelle's the best manager ever. Send us your Y'all are the best.
I don't know if they could hear that, but dang it. Yeah, I hope they could hear you.